Hi everyone, how's everyone doing today? Welcome to my photo chat live stream where we come together as a community and talk about photography and catch up on how everybody's doing. I'm doing well, thanks, and I hope you guys are doing well. So yeah, it's been kind of a busy week for me since the snow let up. Uh, I've been able to get out and especially because David Crooks loaned me his 150 to 600. I gave it back to him this morning. We went out again, so that's why I'm running a little bit behind because we got back a little bit later than I was planning because you know how it goes when you go out shooting, you kind of lose track of time. Anyhow, let me adjust my camera a little bit. Let me know the audio and video looks okay otherwise. And let's see, there's a button here. And we'll get started. And I'll share with you some photos I did this week. I talked a little bit about last week how I might be doing an event. So I have one or two photos that I can share there, and also some thoughts on using the 150 to 600, you know, the big lens on my OM1. And let me erase this up. There we go. Be about right there. Okay. So that's that. And I see a lot of people are here already, which is awesome. I see the Gray Vanzini. Oh, David, yep, we're here. uh, yeah, David has bad knees. He was just mentioning here. So we had to walk really at a snail's pace, but I appreciate, you know, he's definitely more committed than I am at this whole thing. He gets out there, rain or shine, pain, no pain. I'm cold, you know. I found that I got this condition where I'm hypersensitive to cold weather. Normally it's on my toes, but I got a little bit on my finger today where it just it swells up and gets red, and it's kind of painful, especially on my toes. But anyway, yeah, and it's not that cold today. It's like in the 40s, but I'm still cold. I must have bad circulation or something. But anyway, he got out. He gets out a lot more than I ever would, given our schedules, because he works. He has a day job, right? And he still gets out more than I do. Um, and let's see. I see Heather's here. Good to see you. ATR Bear, Julio, Henning, Adam. Good to see you. And just as always, I like the audience to drive the conversation. So if you have any questions or topics you want to talk about, you know, I'll be happy to do that best I can, or give you my opinion if you ask on certain things, photography related. Always do my best. So let's see. Let me go to the top here, and hope you all have an amazing day. It's a sunny Sunday afternoon in Germany in my place. Outdoor macro season soon to start. Yeah, spring is around the corner. Oh, thank goodness. I mean, we're supposed to get a little bit of snow tomorrow, but uh yeah, warm weather. I can't wait. I'm already building up my spring wardrobe, getting ready for that. And good morning, Roger. Good to see you. And good morning from Adam. And let's see. David Black, good morning from Southern Indiana. And Marcia, it's good to see you. And we have Dr. Eldon Rel Rosen, definitely over in California. Oh, I'm so jealous. California has the best weather, right? But the you know, between the earthquakes and the fires and the flooding, it's a little tricky otherwise, right? uh let's see. And good morning, Darko. Good to see you. And Roger. And oh, is Jeff here? Oh, Jeff is here. Hey Jeff, good to see you. And let's see. My free podcast. That's cool. And thumbs up, I appreciate that. And as always, you know, if you want to support the channel, and the things that I do here with the live streaming and videos. You know, I have links down below. You can buy me a coffee or you can become a member. It's just 99 cents. All those things are greatly appreciated. And I'm the quintessential rock. I am not. I'm not that special. I'm just a photographer just like you guys, you know. Get out there and we do our best. Let's see. Thumb is always the first thing to do. Oh, yep. Okay, let me scroll past some of these comments here. Audio video is good, thank you. And Thomas is here. Good to see you. 20 degrees Celsius. That's a nice day. That's a nice day. And your finger looks like Raynaud's syndrome, which I have. Moving south has made it distant memory. At least not, yeah. It's Raynaud's or chilblain. I don't know. It's this is more of a recent thing, the last few years. First I thought maybe it was just like athlete's foot or something, right? But you know, yeah, it's not fun. Getting old sucks. Big new moon tomorrow night. Hi, Peter. Just watched your 7-year-old moon photography video. Time, I know, 7 years. 8 years here on YouTube, maybe going on 9. I lost track. Actually, going on 10. I think I started December 2016, give or take. And John from the UK, good to see you. And oh, from Sweden, nice. Magnus. What an awesome name, Magnus. Okay, so I didn't see any questions, so I'll go ahead and just talk a little bit about the 150 to 600. I made a couple of posts showing some images, and I've posted them online as well on my Flickr page and Instagram. But this is the best place to see the images because you're seeing the full resolution. But okay, we'll start here. So this is a pretty straightforward shot. You know, bird on the water. This is a female merganser. This is the 150 to 600. And you can see, you know, just amazing detail. There's the EXIF data here. I was using the 150 to 600 with the 1.4 teleconverter one day, and then the other day I didn't have the teleconverter. So we're going to see with and without the teleconverter. 1/1000th of a second, ISO 400, so really good lighting for the most part. And this is a very typical shot that you can get at Huntley Meadows Park. And I went to Huntley Meadow Park for all of these because that's kind of our wildlife little pit stop here in Virginia. And let's see, this one, oh, you know, this is not the 150 to 600. This, I ran into another friend of mine, Eric, while I was there, and he has the Panasonic 100 to 400. So I let it, you know, he let me borrow it for about 10, 15 minutes, and I got this shot. And that lens is surprisingly compact. You know, I've seen it many times, you know, out in the field, but I've never put it on my camera before. And it's a really small lens, a really good alternative to the OM system 100 to 400, which is, you know, much larger. And the results are great. You know, it's tack sharp. I did run into a weird issue with the image stabilization where, you know, I would be framing something. The image stabilization doesn't run while I'm framing with this lens. I don't know if it's a setting I had wrong, but and then when I would push the shutter button, the image stabilization would kick in, and the composition, the framing would shift quite a bit to where, for example, let's say I frame this bird like this, and then when I take the picture, the bird will be up here, almost out of frame because the image stabilization shifted up or down. And Yeah, that was kind of a problem. So, and that was with the teleconverter. I used the teleconverter. This image, I didn't use a teleconverter, but when I had the teleconverter combined, the Olympus OM system teleconverter with the 100 to 400, I was getting this weird shifting of the image stabilization. When I took the teleconverter off, then the framing was exactly as I expected. So that was kind of a weird. I think if I could use the lens for a week or so, I'd work out all the little kinks that I'd have to get it to work as I would expect it to. Uh, but I have no question about the optical quality of this lens. The lens is very, very sharp. Okay, and then this is a red-bellied woodpecker. This is this is with the 100 to 600 at 840 millimeters, wide open at f9, 1600th of a shutter speed and ISO 1000, and just the amazing reach that you get with an 840 millimeter angle of view on a micro four thirds. It's just unbelievable how close you can get. And I'll talk a little bit about the sharpness and things like that in a minute, but I wanted to get through a few sample images. This one I filled the frame basically with this cardinal, and you can see, other than the red's clipping a little bit up in here, you can see every fine little feather detail on this. And I was at what? Again, I was at the fully extended out here to 840 millimeters, 1,000th of a second, ISO 1000 also, f9. And so this is a testament to the image stabilization built in. I was able to get, this is about a stop under, I guess, relatively speaking. They claim up to what, 6 or 7 stops total. I can never get that much when I use it, but definitely within a stop. So it's always good to keep your shutter speed up. It's just best practice. 1/1000th is kind of pushing it when you're at 840 millimeters, but it came out great. And here's a merganser. And this one is, I had to zoom out because he was pretty close. I was only at 669 millimeters this, but same shutter speed, 1/1000th of a second, and just amazing detail across the board. This is the 100 to 400. So I was able to quickly snap a shot of this mallard in flight. I believe this is a female. And yeah, this is looking really good. My shutter speed was what, 1/2000. My shutter speed was a little low. I like to be at 1/4000th for birds in flight, especially these smaller birds like ducks. But this came out pretty good. 1/4000th or 1/2000th of a second, f7.1, and ISO 1000. I may have had the teleconverter on this, but no. I'm at 400 millimeters, so no. I didn't get too many shots with the teleconverter. This is the 150 to 600, and again, I had good settings for this one. 1/4000th of a second, if I recall. Yeah, ISO 2000, and I'm at 840 millimeters. And again, this is just super sharp, really nice detail. Yeah, it's misfocused a little bit up here. The focus seems to be on the talons, and that's where I got the most detail. But normal field of view or normal, looking at it in normal size, it's perfectly fine. Okay, sorry, I need to get my energy back up, so I got some matcha tea. Okay, just 2 more pictures here. And I took a couple today with my regular 300 f4 Pro. This is an owl sitting out there. I believe this is the female guarding the nest. And this was also the 150 to 600. at 840 millimeters, and I'm at 1/1250th of a second ISO 1250. And yeah, it's perfectly fine shot. Very, very nice and sharp. Very, very happy. This one is red-headed woodpecker in flight. And I was at 1/4000th of a second, ISO 2000, 840 millimeters, f9. And again, not bad. Not bad. This is cropped in quite a bit because it's a very small bird. Even with the reach that I had with this 840 millimeters, this bird was pretty far away. This one is cropped into yeah, this is basically 3 megapixels for this entire frame. So the bird itself is probably, what, 1 megapixel worth of data there. And it looks great. I got a couple of more shots of this guy today. Let me see. These are the raw images. I haven't processed any yet because I just got back. But this one's looking pretty good, you know? And this is with my 300 millimeter. It's another nice one. This one's a little better light. Some organzas. So I definitely need to process these. Yeah, that one looks good. I like that one. I got one of a here's the owl again, sleeping away. Oh, I love these shots here of the this is a red-winged blackbird. I think this is the money shot here. I love this particular wing position. So once I process these, they're going to be freaking awesome. I'll just do a quick process. Just crop in. And throw in some smart lighting, some contrast, and clear view. Export. Okay, so we'll look at that. But anyway, let me go back to some comparisons here. So what I did here is I took my 300 millimeter f4 with the teleconverter, the 1.4, and then the 150 to 600 with the 1.4 teleconverter. So I'm at 420 millimeters here, and over here I'm at 840 millimeters, so half, right, or double. And what I did was I moved closer to get the same field of view. So with the 300 millimeter, you know, I'm say like at 10 feet, and with the 600 millimeter lens, I'm at 20 feet. So basically I just moved closer so I could get the same frame, because what I wanted to do is compare the lenses when they have the same field of view at the maximum zoom. So the only way you get the same field of view is if you have to move closer, if you have a shorter focal length. And clearly you can see, as you would expect, the 300 millimeter f4 Pro is just way sharper than the 150 to 600. But the 150 to 600 is you're further back. Okay, so you look at this picture and you're thinking, okay, game over. I'm just going to get the 300 f4 Pro, but not so fast. Okay, because my next shot here is where I stood at the same distance. So I'm 20 feet back. I was actually probably 50 feet back So I'm about 50 feet away from this little stump, this perch that I made for my birding. So now the field of view has changed, right? The 300 f4 Pro now has a much wider field of view because we're standing at the same distance and it's a shorter focal length, half. And the 150 to 600 is now has the same field of view basically, but it's much tighter. Same field of view as the previous image. So what I have to do now is I have to crop in 400% on the 300 millimeter, and I only have to crop in 200% on the 150 to 600 to achieve the same field of view. And in this scenario, they look exactly the same, more or less. I mean, there's some variables here. There's slightly more coma on the 600 millimeter, 150 to 600, but it's not a big deal, right? When we talk about the fine detail, this is where the 150 to 600 is going to be sharper than the 300 f4 when you do something like this. So what I'm saying is you're getting more pixels on the subject when you have to crop in. You're getting more pixels on the subject than you would with a shorter focal length, right? So I had to pixel peep like 800 to 1,000% to see the difference. Looking at 200 and 400% that I have here, they look pretty much the same. Maybe give an edge on contrast to the 300 f4 Pro. But I can tell you the 600 millimeter, the 150 to 600 zoomed all the way in to 600 millimeters. Being able to fill the frame more with your subject, you're going to get more detail than you will with the 300 f4 Pro and cropping in, right? It's very subtle. Not enough that I feel like I need to buy the 150 to 600. I think the 300 f4 is performing, close enough that because I try not to crop in that much anyway, generally speaking. But, and the 300 f4 has some other advantages over the 150 to 600, as it should, right? Because it's a pro lens. But I can tell you that if you can manage the size and weight of the 150 to 600, I have no trouble recommending that lens. I mean, the size and weight is prohibitive for many people. I get comments all the time. I got one the other day, yesterday, I think. Someone bought it, it came in, they returned it the next day because it was just, they couldn't hold it steady. And I think they mentioned they do video work. They couldn't hold it steady at the maximum zoom when it was zoomed out because it extends out to like something like this size. It extends out to 600 millimeters and it just couldn't hold it steady. And I also hear a lot of people complain about, just the weight itself. It weighs a pound more than my 300 f4 or 500 grams, give or take, something like that. But it's significantly heavier and larger than the 300 f4 Pro. So size and weight can be an issue, but in the right conditions, because you do lose a little bit of light, it's not as fast a lens, just really only a third of a stop at the long end, right? That's not a big deal, but and I'm talking about with 1 1/3 stop, excuse me, 1 1/3 stop. You lose about 1 1/3 stop on the on the long end. I don't know about the short end. It's probably a little closer, but on the long end, you lose about 1 1/3 stop of light. So you have to take that into account as well. So there's a lot of things to balance, right? The aperture, the 1 1/3 stop loss of light on the aperture. It is a little bit softer lens overall, but you got double the reach, and then the size and weight. And they cost about the same, give or take. I mean, most people are not going to buy both lenses. They're going to pick one because the price is close enough. So, there's no substitute for the versatility of having a zoom in the field and having double the reach and knowing that inherently I'm going to get more detail on the long end because of the extra reach could, makes the decision a lot harder for me. If I didn't have the 300 f4 Pro already, it would make the decision very difficult for me knowing what I know now between the two lenses. Because for me, I found the weight manageable. I just carried it on a rapid strap, a sling, and I was able to pick it up, boom, get the bird in the frame. It was a little harder because of the tighter field of view. But I was able to pick it up, and I didn't have any problems managing the size and weight of it. You are pretty much committed though to only using that lens, unlike because it is a pound more. 1 pound, right? Or with 1 pound, I can bring my 60 macro, I can bring my 40 to 150 kit, I can bring a couple of primes. I can bring a lot of extra lenses with a pound difference in weight, right? So with my 300 f4 Pro, I usually go out with a couple other lenses and a flash together with the camera. But with the 150 to 600, I'm pretty much committed to only shooting with that lens because it's already a pound more. And not that it's a big deal, but you know how it is, right? Every ounce that you add to your body as you're going out on a few hour photo walk, it adds up pretty quickly and gets cumbersome. And the other thing is the 300 f4 Pro fits in my sling bag. So I can take it off, put it in my bag, and put on my 60 macro or 25 prime, and I'm good, and I can keep going. But with the 150 to 600, I can't just drop that in my sling bag. It's too big, right? So that's kind of the issue for me with the 150 to 600 is just you have to be committed to shooting with that lens when you go out. You don't have options. Say, you see some beautiful fungi or some flowers, you're not going to swap lenses to a 60 macro because the 150-600 is just, that's the only lens you're going to bring. At least for me. When I go out, that's the only lens I'm going to bring, and I'm going to be committed to shooting with that. The other thing is, and this is really true whether it's the 300 or the 150 to 600, but sometimes you got to sit there and wait like a half an hour for a bird to do something, right? Like you see the perfect shot if the bird would take off or do something, right? But right now it's just sitting there, right? So you can't sit there like this for a half an hour. You're going to have to rest your arms, right? I can't even hold my arms up for half an hour, let alone a camera and lens for a half an hour like this. So you need to use a monopod with a gimbal or a tripod. And it's easy enough to bring a tripod together with that lens. I have my tripod on a sling also, so I can just put it on my back. But you do want to have the option. You do definitely want to bring a monopod with a gimbal. Mine is in the car, otherwise I'd show you the one that I brought. But many of you have seen it before. I didn't have any opportunities today or this week. I didn't have really any shots that I felt like I'd have to wait for half an hour for the bird to do something. Although there was that red-bellied woodpecker today. They'll sit there and chop away and look for bugs in a tree for like a half an hour before they decide to fly off, right? But yeah, so like I was saying, it would be a hard decision for me, knowing what I know now about the two lenses, to make a choice, given they're roughly the same price, right? So for me, I'm going to value size and weight over reach. I think ultimately I would still get the 300 f4 Pro with the 1.4 teleconverter. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to get better results for the same field of view. right? Because the 600 has double the reach. Now, the other thing the 300 f4 Pro does better is the autofocus. It just has faster linear motors. I mean, that thing from point A to point B, blip, that thing is spot on. So there were definitely a couple of shots that I missed of a bird in flight, where it just kind of came out of the trees and the lens was not able to keep up. The 150 to 600 was not able to keep up and lock focus on it in time for me to get the shot. Whereas the 300 f4 Pro, I'm pretty sure I would have got that shot because the autofocus is like just lightning quick. And like I said, as you would expect, a Pro lens should have very fast autofocusing. So there's the minor things. Now, well, those are not maybe not minor, but I just want to bring those up to you. The autofocusing is faster on the 300 f4 Pro. There's less coma. It's certainly smaller and lighter, and it's extremely sharp lens that you can crop in 400% and almost get the same image as you would from the 600, but only cropping in half as much, right? But ultimately, like I said, the 150 to 600 will get you more detail because you don't have to crop in as much. You're reaching out and you're getting more pixels on the subject. So that's my overall impression of that lens. I got really nothing bad to say about the lens. It's a great lens. It surprised me. It was much better than I expected. I mean, I've had a chance to use it for like 5 or 10 minutes before, but never have I had it for a week. And it took me a week to I got a good feel for it now. The first day, it took me a couple hours, but I didn't get a feel for it until towards the end of the photo walk, like I was telling you last week. But now that I've taken it out 2 or 3 more times, it's definitely a great lens. And just like your camera gear, you have to get to know your lens and how to use it, with how it performs in the field and in real life, particularly the autofocusing, zooming in and out, the image stabilization. There's so many things that you have to kind of get a feel for, and then adjust your shooting style or technique a little bit to the lens. So I don't shoot the 150 to 600 the same as I would my 300 f4 Pro. I have to make certain tweaks to my technique and settings to get the most out of that lens versus the 300 f4 Pro, and vice versa. The 300 f4 Pro, I have to use a little bit differently. And my expectations of subjects, because I don't have the same reach, there's certain things that I'm not going to go for, right? That I would go with the 150 to 600. But the 300 f4 Pro, the advantage is, the size and weight and being able to carry extra things with you if you want. But yeah, so I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments or in the chat section, if you have this lens or had it, and returned it or sold it. If you love the lens or you didn't like the lens, or, you tried it and decided to get something else, it wasn't what you needed, because sometimes there's nothing wrong with the lens, it's just not right for you, right? There's plenty of lenses like that, like the 50 to 250 that just came out, f2.8. I just don't see myself. It's a great lens, but what am I going to use it for? I just don't have any use for something like that. And even though I'm a sports wildlife guy, most of my subjects, I'm shooting at the full 300 millimeters on my 300 f4. I rarely do I need anything less than that. All right, let me go back to the chat section, because I don't think I have any other comparison shots. I have a few more shots here that I took with this lens. Just beautiful detail out of this lens. And these are all processed with DxO, of course. But you can get great results with this lens. As good as you could possibly want. for the price point. Like this one, I was able to fill the frame and just gobs of detail. And this is without the teleconverter though. Without the teleconverter, of course, the lens is even sharper, right? You don't have the same reach, but the lens is even sharper without the teleconverter. Okay, that's enough about that lens. Let me go back to the chat section because you guys may have been asking questions while I was showing those images. Okay, did you change the name of the Flickr group? I only see plus 18 group now. No, it should be the same. I didn't change anything. Let me go in there now and see. Hold on. I'll put a link to it. It should be the same. So Serge is referring to the community page here that I have on Flickr. It should be fine. I don't see any issues. Gosh, I haven't been here in about a week. But there's a lot of great images in here. Oh, look at that, Serge. You seem to be posting. You've really been doing a lot of wildlife lately. I'm used to seeing you do landscapes and forest type shots. Okay, and Darko says, I scooped up a Takina 11 to 15 f2.8. Oh yeah, I know that lens. APS-C for 99, but wow, that's a good deal. They say AF is slow, but it is fast on my Z50. Bless XP 7, yeah. Cool. Yeah, I love, so that's an equivalent, what, 18? So I have to kind of do everything backwards. So that's about a 9mm on, on the wide end for micro four thirds. That's a great lens. And I love wide angle. I did some wide angle shots today with this guy. They as wide as this camera is already, they have a wide angle lens adapter. So I'm going to be reviewing that in a couple weeks. And Adam asks, what are your thoughts on the Flickr Photo Festival? I have no idea. I have no thoughts on it at all. I don't pay attention to contests and competitions and whatever this photo festival thing is. It's kind of a distraction to me. And Darkwood says, are you getting 100 to 600 eventually? No. Like I said, I like the advantages that I get with the 300 f4 Pro being smaller, lighter, and allows me to carry like a messenger bag with some extra lenses. The 150 to 600 is just, you're committed to that, as I was saying, and I think that would be the deal breaker for me. If I can get a super good deal, like if somebody sells me theirs for $1,000, I'll get it, But I'm not going to spend brand new price for it, whatever that is. Like right now it's on sale for what, 2,500? I'd rather save up for the 150 to 400 because I did take that out for about an hour, when Ben was around a year and a half ago. And no question, the 150 to 400 Pro, an amazing lens. My problem is I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford a lens like that. It's just so out of reach. Even used, like if I can get a used one for less than 6,000, that's still boatload of money. And didn't know you could use the Ollie TC with the pen. Yes, I didn't either. I said, let's try it, right? Eric didn't know. I didn't know. So we tried it and it worked. But like I said, there was a weird thing with the image stabilization. When I half pressed the shutter button, it wouldn't stabilize. And then when I took the picture, it would stabilize, but the sensor would shift. And that was kind of an issue. Something that might be fixable. I just didn't have time to figure it out. And do you use SH2 for birds in flight? Yes, SH2, maximum frames per, that's the other thing. The 150 to 600 only goes up to 25 frames per second, whereas the 300 f4 Pro gives me 50 frames per second. And that is also a big deal. Ray Vanzini says, that's a great comparison. Oh, thanks. I tried. Next man is here. Hi, Rob. What is the longest Micro Four Thirds lens you tried to use? The one I just talked about, the 150 to 600. I'm not aware of any that are longer, but there might be. Henning says, I do never crop that much. I don't take a shot that's too far away. No FOMO. So clearly 300 f4 wins for me. Yes. Yeah, like I said, you have to kind of, you know, you don't have the reach, so you have to adjust your shooting accordingly in the subjects that you take. And Jeff says, would love to see a comparison of 300 f4 Pro with the MC20 against the 150 to 600. That's doable if David has the 2x teleconverter. So maybe he can lend me the lens and that teleconverter, and I can do that comparison sometime in the future. So I'll talk to Dave and see. I'm not a fan of the 2x teleconverter. I just feel like it just softens the image too much. The 1.4 is barely noticeable. There's a little bit of loss, right? But not the 2x. It was painfully obvious the difference with and without it. And Darko says, I either use a monopod or a gimbal with my slick tripod with my 200 to 500 f5.6 on a Z50. Yep. I mean, the big lens, right? Big lenses require a monopod tripod. And Marla says, do you have an adjustable harness to recommend? I would just recommend getting the rapid strap. You know, I know it's like $80, $90, and there are generics out there that you can get for about, you know, half or less than that price. But I would stick with the rapid strap. And David says, I do have a 300 f4 and MC20, so I could do some tests. I just had a photo published from the local camera club with the 150 to 600 MC. Oh, yeah, he was showing me that. I misunderstood you today. I thought you said you were on the cover, but you meant your photo was on the cover, so that's cool. And Darko says, I do use my 70 to 200 f4 with a 1.7 TC for walk around nature walks. Yep, that's a nice combo. Is it a 1.7? I'm not as familiar with the Nikon stuff, but Darko shoots Nikon just for reference to, because he only gave the focal length, but he didn't mention the brand. And Wayne says, I love the images from the 150 to 600. I mainly use it when shooting from a blind. Yep. So Wayne has this lens and has positive feedback for it, right? Just as I do, for the most part. I mean, there's always pros and cons to everything, but I think, you know, if you need the reach, there's definitely some pros there. It's definitely a pro. And Melon says, good morning. How do I buy a Blazer lens? I live in I don't know what a Blazer lens is. I'm sorry. I wouldn't be able to tell you how to buy one. And Henning says, but welcome to the stream. I don't think I've seen you before, so I appreciate you joining us today. Always good to see new people. And Henning says, with a big and heavy package like this, I'd rather go with a Nikon Z8 plus 600 f4 and crop in 45 megapixels later. So there's definitely a lot of ways to do the math, right? Because we're just talking about math here. Do you get a Z8 with 45 megapixels and a 600 f4, crop in, you're down to like, say, 12 or 15 megapixels with the same reach? Tough call. It's a tough call. I would argue if you already have a Z8, there's no reason to go to Micro Four Thirds, right? But just keep in mind, a Z8 is $4,000. A 600 f4 is $13,000, right? So now we're talking, I don't know, $16,000 or $17,000 in gear. I would say to get the same quality out of Micro Four Thirds, you need a $2,000 camera, you know, the OM1 Mark II, and it's now $8,500. But, you know, we're talking about roughly a $5,000 price gap. to get, I would argue, the same quality out of Micro Four Thirds for less money and maybe less weight. I don't know what the weight and size are. They're probably the same or close enough that it doesn't matter, right? Because there's kind of a tipping point, right? It's like, okay, you know, my OM3 with a 12 to 45, definitely smaller, lighter package than any full frame system with equivalent field of view, right? Because I'd have to get a 24 to 70, but this goes up to 90, so I'd really need a 24 to 105 to kind of match this. And now we're talking big honking lens, right? But when I start putting on bigger lenses on this camera to try to get the same field of view, you know, at some point it doesn't matter. It might as, you know, it doesn't matter how much heavier another system is, right? Because you're going to need a tripod or monopod anyway. So if I drop the 150 to 600 on this camera, and I did shoot a few images with this camera, or I get, you know, or I put that same lens, because Sigma makes it in different mounts, right? The same lens. It doesn't matter. The body's almost irrelevant. It's only a very small percentage of the overall weight because the lens is the bulk of the weight of the system. So I get it, you know. I would just say, like you hear all the time, it doesn't make any sense to switch systems, right? You buy the lenses that you need for the system or the gear that you need to make the system do what you want it to do if it's capable. And the OM1 is in OM3, but the OM1 in particular is a flagship camera with really amazing capabilities, you know, 50 frames per second with continuous autofocus and full RAW, you know, amazing buffer, and the image quality, you know, you're already cropped into 20 megapixels, so you don't need the crop. It's a crop sensor. And you just throw on the lens that you need to get the field of view that you want. Okay, and good morning, everybody. I have the 75 to 300. I wanted the 300 f4 since you got yours and have been showing us how nice it is. Yes, you definitely, I would say the 300 f4 is a no-brainer if it's within your budget. Or it's a great lens to have until you can buy the 150 to 400. You know, I don't know if the 150 to 400 will ever be within reach for me. And you know, I could put it on a credit card, right? But come on, it's still $6,000 used, give or take. But trust me, I've been tempted many times. I could just put this on my credit card and pay it off over 10 years. You know, something stupid, right? But I don't know. One day maybe. One day I might just snap and buy it. Put it on a credit card, but I can't just buy it right out. That's the problem. And Jeffrey McFeeder says, it is hard to argue with a lens that can resolve so well as the 300 f4. The best primes on every format, 300 and 400, have historically been the best resolving glass for a given system, due to, you know, you're saying because of physics. Well, physics is the same regardless of focal length, right? But I get where you're coming from. And, you know, well, no, you're right. It does come down to physics, right? Because you have such a narrow field of view with 300 millimeters, or angle of view. There's a difference between angle of view and field of view, but the angle of view is pretty tight on a 300 millimeter lens. And the physics of how the light travels through the lens will make it less prone to spreading, which ultimately gives you a sharper image because, especially on cameras that have a very tight pixel pitch. You know, I'm not an engineer or anything. I'm just trying to extrapolate from everything I've read online about, you know, lens design. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. But intuitively, it makes sense to me what you're saying, that it's due to physics that a 300 millimeter is going to be a very good lens regardless of brand, right? Nikon's got some great 300 millimeter f4. Sony has a 300. They have an f4. They have an f2.8. Well, they definitely have an f2.8. f4, I'm not 100%. And those are all like their best lenses, right? Optically. Just like on the OM system, the 300 f4 is optically, if their best, if not the very best lens as far as primes go. Stacked up against the 150 to 400 is a tough call. Because when I shot with the 150 to 400, I was just, my jaw just dropped how good that lens is. And OM needs a 100 to 300 f4 Pro with a single barrel internal focus design. They're pretty close with the 50 to 250. But an f4 would make the lens considerably smaller. Why stop at 300 though? What's wrong with the 100 to 400? A 100 to 400 f4 would be better. If they could pull that off. 300 isn't quite enough. I'll take a 100 to 400 with a fixed f5.6. Internal focus, all of that. A 100 to 300, that just wouldn't cut it for me personally. Just like the 50 to 250 doesn't do anything for me. So I'm a little biased against anything less than 300, even though we're talking about 300. But so basically you're talking about taking my 300 f4 Pro and making it a zoom between 100 and 300. That would be interesting. That would be interesting. That would be interesting. It'd be nice to have more choices anyway, regardless. The 150 to 600 is far too heavy for me. I prefer my 300 f4 Pro. Even found my 150 to 400 a bit too cumbersome, so I sold it. Wow, okay. So I get that though, right? Because the 150 to 400 is only a little bit lighter than the 150 to 600. And then when you put the lens hood on, it gets pretty big, right? They both do. Yeah, I get it. And I can tell you a lot of 150 to 400 millimeter owners have told me that the 300 f4 Pro is just as sharp in their experience as the 150 to 400. So unless I really need the zoom and or that extra reach that the 150 to 400 offers, you know, I shouldn't be sweating it. I should be very happy with what I have, and I am. And Wayne says, how did you carry the lens? I use a cotton carrier vest with mine. Yeah, so I just used the rapid strap, right? Just the sling strap. And that was fine. It was perfectly manageable. I think I have a picture of me with it. So yeah, if you guys go to my community page for posts, you know, this is where I post a lot of stuff that I talk about in the stream. I haven't even talked about this yet. I need to talk about that. And you know, if you right click on the picture and say open an image in new tab, you'll get the full resolution image. Just so you know, you don't have to look at the little tiny thumbnail that you get in the post. You can open up the image. But yeah, this is just a sling strap. I gave it to David today. I have a rapid strap. This is a generic one. But this was very manageable, this setup. Just throwing it on a sling. No problem at all for me. But you know, like Cliff was saying, he found it cumbersome, and it is. It is. I just like the option of taking off my 300 f4, putting it in my messenger bag, and grabbing a different lens to do something else. So the size weight is cumbersome, not just physically, but also in terms of workflow. You have to limit yourself to just one lens. You know, unless you want to carry a backpack, right? Then you're, but the workflow is not fluid like with the 300 f4 Pro, just being so small to take it off and throw it in your messenger bag and put on another lens. With the 150 to 600, you ain't doing that. You have to tear down the whole setup, put it in your backpack, you know. And I get it. I could buy a bigger bag. Anyway. And Jeffrey says, we think of acuity in lenses like location and real estate, but there's more to it, and all the glass is really good. Relax and enjoy the fact that we can get outstanding images with multiple kits. Yes. I mean, ultimately, that's all that matters, right? Just go out and enjoy, uh, you know, photography. Because I'm not like the guy over at Tin House Studios. I don't know what his name is. I love his channel though. But he's a high-end professional photographer. He's also an agent for other photographers. And he does primarily, I think he said he's changing though, but up until recently, I think potentially, but he was basically a stills photographer in a studio doing product photography and other, you know, international campaigns. So he's an interesting. It's interesting. I watch it out of academic curiosity. I'm never going to be that kind of photographer or anywhere near that level, but you know, it's a good channel. But you know, for us, me and my channel, you know, I try to appeal to enthusiasts and people that do it for fun, right? We're not trying to go out and be professional photographers. I know many of you were professional photographers and are now retired or not doing it anymore for whatever reason. So you're much better photographers than I am, and I appreciate the very nice feedback that you guys give me. But I'm not going to pretend to be as good a photographer as many of my viewers. You guys are much better than I am. But what's great about this community is we can all come together, beginners, experienced professionals, and retired professionals, and share this passion that we have to do photography and help each other out, right? Like, I know Jeff is, you know, very high-end professional photographer, and just little things like he didn't know you could use an Olympus teleconverter on the Panasonic 100 to 400. You know, none of us know it all. We can all learn from each other, just little things here and there, right? Uh, we have to work with everyone at all levels, and we all learn together. Okay, that's enough of that. And that was for David. And let's see, this is with good light and only doing casual birding, the 75 to 300 seems to make sense from a cost weight. So no question, the 75 to 300 is awesome. And I should do like another comparison. I did a comparison years ago, and I found a 75 to 300 actually to be almost as good as the 300 f4 Pro, aside from, you know, the light in it. But there's a lot more now that I'm a few years more seasoned in birding and photography. I should do another comparison, because a lot of my early videos, you know, I didn't start doing photography until like 2013. I was a complete beginner. I didn't know nothing. I didn't know what aperture was, you know, like basic photography things. But now I'm a little more seasoned, right? I've been doing this, what, almost 13 years. So I'm going to have a different point of view or a different opinion on a lot of the things that I did early on in my photography. So doing another 75 to 300 versus 300 f4, say, versus 150 to 600 versus teleconverter versus, I mean, you can make a huge, there's an infinite number of permutations here, but some direct comparisons like you're suggesting make sense, right? A 75 to 300 versus 300 f4. You would think there should be no comparison between the two, but there's a lot of comparisons to be made and a lot of advantages. similar to the 150 to 600 versus the 300, it seems like that there shouldn't be that's not a fair comparison, but there are comparisons to be made between the two because the price point's about the same and a lot of people might be deciding between the two. The 75 to 300, even though the price points are vastly different, right? Most people looking at a 75 to 300 are not considering a 300 f4 Pro, if they're trying to choose. But if you've had the 75 to 300 for a while and you're thinking about upgrading, how much more are you getting with a 300 f4 Pro versus what you're already using? And that will help you to make a better decision about, the 300 f4 Pro. Because I can tell you definitely the 100 to 400 OM system lens, great lens, but I already had the 75 to 300. I didn't see a need to buy the 100 to 400. It wasn't quite enough. It wasn't that much more better. Much better English there. Good English. Anyway, it wasn't that much more better, right? That I'd want to spend another $1,500 just to get a little better, more reach, a little better, teleconverter. There's all kinds of pluses there on the 100 to 400. But if I could save up for the 300 f4 Pro, I would recommend you do that. If you cannot save up for the, if the 300 f4 Pro is never going to be on your radar, then yeah, the 100 to 400 is a nice upgrade to the 75 to 300. But because the 300 f4 Pro was within reach, it just made sense for me to skip that 100 to 400. Okay. But yeah, I agree. The 75 to 300 is an amazing lens for the money. I got mine. I paid $450 for mine used, some years ago. It still sells for about that now, I believe. And it's a lens I take out, even though I have the 300 f4 Pro, I still take the 75 to 300 time to time because I don't want to carry the 300 f4 Pro. Sometimes even this lens, this lens can be too much sometimes. I'm just not feeling like taking this out. So, and I never regret not taking, let me put it this way. When I take the 75 to 300, I don't get to the location and regret that I didn't bring the 300 f4 Pro because I know the 75 to 300 is going to give me decent performance, right? Good enough that I'm going to be very happy with the images I bring home from that lens. Now, a lot of times, like today, I want the very best, right, that I can do. I want the very best gear that I own. Yeah, I'm going to take the 300 f4 Pro because I know it's better, faster, all of that stuff, more reach. And I'm going to enjoy that, but I can tell you if you have the 75 to 300, you should have no regrets about buying that lens, and your next lens should be the 300 f4 Pro. Just skip the 100 to 400. Unless, of course, the 300 is not on your radar at all because of the price point. Then the 100 to 400 is a nice upgrade. You know what? The best lens for vlogging for M43? I would say the 9mm from Panasonic. That's a good lens to vlog with. With respect to, it'll give you a nice wide field of view to give you sort of the environment that you're vlogging in. It's very fast at f1.7. It might be 1.8, but let's say it's 1.7. So it's going to work well for low light, like when you're doing street photography or just going out in the field and it's sunset. You want to have as fast a lens as possible, and it's relatively small, lightweight. It's not a big, heavy lens. So the 9mm is a good choice. My second choice would be the 12mm f2. Not quite as wide a field of view, but there's going to be less wide angle distortion. Because wide angle can get wonky sometimes when you're looking at it. But a 12 millimeter will give you a nice, relatively normal field of view, but it's still wide enough that you can hold it at arm's length and get, it's gonna be mostly a headshot, but you can hold it at arm's length and still see what's going on behind you. And f2 is very, very bright. And that's the lens I vlogged with for a long time. When I was doing more vlogging when I started this channel. So those are the two lenses I would recommend. Lenses I would avoid that are kind of similar are like the 9-18. It's too slow at f4.5 or whatever. It's too slow. It's going to be a problem in low light for vlogging. Now, all that said, we're talking about a $500 lens, right? Whether it's the 12 millimeter or the 9 millimeter, let's say it's $500. For 500 bucks, you can go out and buy a DJI gimbal camera. You can get this for 500 bucks. Okay? And this is much better for vlogging. Much, much better. So my final advice would be forget about vlogging with like a real interchangeable lens camera. Forget about vlogging with a camera. Just buy a dedicated vlogging camera like this. This is Ace Pro. I'm sorry. This is Ace Pro 2. They're going to kill me over there at Insta360. Did I just call this a DJI? Get an Ace Pro 2, right? This is awesome for vlogging. It goes on sale for like 400 bucks sometimes. So that's less or about the same as you would pay for a vlogging lens. So why not go this way? I think it's better to do this. And it has the flip screen. You can go even wider. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Okay. Jeff, oh, sorry, that's not for me. And that's not for me. I also value f4 in my 300. The 150 to 400 is also bright at f4.5, but the 150 to 600 is too slow and dim for woodland for me. Yeah, so the 1 1/3 stop, right? Basically, because we're talking about f4 versus f6.3 on the long end. Like I said, I don't know what the short end is. It's probably less than a stop. It can be an issue. It's mitigated quite a bit. I mean, all things being equal, it's still 1 1/3 stop loss, right? But I found that up to about ISO 6400 with DxO, whether it's the Photolab that I use or the Pure Raw, up to about ISO 6400, I can clean up the images enough that they look just as good as my 300 f4 Pro, right? It's just when you get up into the higher ISOs over 6400 that you will start to see degradation in image quality on the slower lenses because of the higher ISO. So if I'm trying to denoise, say, a 25,000 ISO image, it's, versus, say, I would be at, say, ISO 16,000 with my 300 f4. But because I'm shooting with the 150 to 600, I'm now at ISO 25,000. No question, the sharper lens, the lower ISO is going to give me the better image, right? So that's definitely another consideration I didn't talk about earlier. I did mention it, the 1 1/3 stop difference in light, but in practice, what I found was under ISO 6400, because let's say I would be like at ISO 3200 with my 300 f4, but I'm at ISO 6400 with the 150 to 600 lens. But with DxO, I can process them both and ultimately get about the same image quality. There's still differences, right? I mean, we're pixel peeping, we'll see the differences, but not enough that for the kind of photography that I do and share, it's going to make much difference. It's only when you get up over that, you start at 64 and go much higher. Yeah, the 150 to 600 to 75 to 300, all these images are going to start to fall apart because the lenses are not optically as good as the pro lenses. And the differences in the optics become more visible the higher the ISO you go. Like when I was shooting with the 150 to 400 at very high ISO, the image quality held up, even though the ISO was like some crazy numbers. So, like I said, these are from about a year and a half ago. I got a chance to shoot with it. But take this image, for example. Definitely there's some noise reduction happening here, but there's also still some pretty good feather detail in this image, right? I'm at ISO 51,000. Just let me zoom in a little bit. I'm at ISO 51,200 on this image. Look at my shutter speed, 1/500th of a second. So I'm well below, best practices here for shutter speed. And I mean, this has been processed with DxO, but let me tell you, if I were to try to denoise a 51,000 ISO image with a 75 to 300, or even the 150 to 600, the optics in those lenses are not going to hold up like this lens. It's just not. So there are some advantages here, the faster aperture, because you will shoot at a lower ISO ultimately, but even more so, the differences in optical quality really seem to stand out when you're shooting at high ISOs. What's this one? This one's ISO 32,000. Still, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from DxO. DxO is doing an amazing job, but a lot of it has to do with the amazing optical quality of the pro lenses that you get from OM Systems. This one is at ISO 1600. So at ISO 1600, I would say that I could have probably got this shot with a 75 to 300 and get roughly the same image quality. Or the perception would be it's about the same. This one is at ISO 10,000. Amazing detail here. And these are processed with the old DxO so this was probably DxO version 5. DxO version 9, what are we up to now? 9.5 is even better. This is at ISO 5000. So this is another image that probably a 75 to 300 could have done if we had the same field of view. But what is this one? ISO 6400. So this is kind of the limit. This is where, like this image, you would never know this was shot at ISO 6400 on a micro four thirds camera, because the optical quality of this lens is amazing. And there's so much detail that this lens can extract. Okay, enough of that. But thanks for reminding me about the 150 to 600 aperture being a little bit slower. It's 1 1/3 stop slower, so you're always going to be at a higher ISO. And as the light drops, if you're in bright daylight, then you're all going to be at ISO 200, regardless of lens. But I'm saying as the light drops, like you were saying in dim woodland. And the Gray Vancini says, I think I could get away with either, but I rarely go that long. Yeah. And for subjects I can't safely get close to, like javelins, outfielders, I prefer a prime lens because just sharper and more croppability. For general use, zooms are flexible and good enough. Yes. That pretty much sums it up, right? And wow, the detail when you zoom in is still great looking. Yes, it is. It is. And Jeffrey McFeeters, thank you so much for your support. That is awesome. Thank you very much for supporting my channel and my streams. And David says, I haven't tried the 100 to 300. That's a penny, right? I always say you get what you pay for. Yeah. David is a sort of a very pragmatic person, right? When it comes to gear. And, you know, he doesn't want to overthink it. Most of the time, you pay more, you get more, right? And X-Meta says, no, long manual focus like, oh, manual focus lens. If you're referring back to the 100 to 300 f4, oh, I don't know. I cannot manual focus birds in flight. Bird on a stick, I could manually focus, like that owl. I'm not sure about any 2.0 teleconverter. Yeah. Yeah, teleconverters, I mean, they have to be more generic and not optimized for the lens that you're converting, right? So there's always going to be some loss optically with any teleconverter because they're generic multipliers, versus if you build that teleconverter into the lens, like the 150 to 400 has a built-in 1.25 teleconverter. That's not a generic teleconverter like the 1.4 and the 2.0. That thing was optically designed specifically for the light path, right, of the 150 to 400. So you're not going to lose any image quality with the teleconverter on a 150 to 400. Nikon TC, okay. And for those on a budget, would you compare the 100 to 400 to the one? I don't have a 100 to 400. I don't know anybody. I mean, I know some people that own it, but I don't think I could borrow it for a week or two to do the comparison. And I looked at the 150 to 400 and couldn't believe the price increase. It was already expensive. I know. I was looking at them used either way, and the used prices went up accordingly, but it's a less harsher hit, right? So like we went up what, over $1,000 on the retail side. On the used side, we went up maybe $500. I think percentage wise probably about the same, but dollar wise it's a little bit more palatable. And let's see, I got the 150 to 600 for 1800 refurb. Yeah, that was a good deal. So far I'm pleased. It will take a little time to get used to the heavier lens that I'm used to, but Rob showed some great results with this test. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you bought this lens and the size weight is manageable, you're going to get great results. But it is different if you've been shooting with a telephoto already. You do need to keep an eye on your shutter speed. Make sure that's fast enough. That was the main thing for me. Was, you know, I could easily shoot ISO, 1/800th of a second with my 300 f4, and I didn't have to worry about motion blur and things like that, from holding the camera. Subject motion, motion blur if the subject's moving, that's a different thing. But with the 150 to 600, I really need to be over 1/1000th of a second. I found 1/1000th of a second. And you're gonna have to test yourself, right? When you go out with the lens and see what you can get away with. But I was able to get away with 1/1000th of a second a lot of the time with that lens. But I prefer 1/2000th, 1/4000th if I'm gonna, regardless of lens, if I'm shooting birds. But if they're a bird on a stick, I comfortably got away with 1/1000th. I felt like when I dropped below that, I was starting to see a little bit of motion blur in the images, for me. and I'm pixel peeping to find these things. But I tried various shutter speeds on that owl that I was taking pictures of, and it's felt like when I was below 1/1000th of a second, I was starting to see a little bit of motion blur, not just on the feathers and fine details, but also like on the tree bark, kind of all over the place, right? Because I tried some shots at 1/640th. Because when you look at the specs, they say you got 5 stops of image stabilization. So 5 stops from where? So if we're at 840 millimeters, but that's a 1680 millimeter equivalent, and if you follow the reciprocal rule, double your shutter speed, you need to be at 1/3200th of a second, right? Without image stabilization. Now, if you drop that 5 stops, we're back down to what? 16, 8, 4, 2. They're saying you can shoot at 1/100th of a second. Did I do that right? 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. Yeah. There's no way you can shoot at 1/100th of a second at 840 millimeters. There's just no way. I would never be able to do that. Maybe some people can, because you see people go online, like even Robin Wong saying, yeah, I can hold a camera for a couple of seconds, right? I guess it depends on the lens. I don't know what lens he was talking about. I might be able to hold like a 9mm for a couple of seconds, but a 600mm lens, I need to be at 1/1000th. And Henry's here. Good day, Rob. I understand that many YouTubers use ads given they are now more like professional broadcasters versus amateur. I think it's time that they start acting like such. I'm not sure what you mean. I think it's time that they start acting like such with ad placements that blend in with the flow of the show, for example. Yeah, I don't have any control over when the ads show. I did turn it to the minimum though. So, because you can set it low, medium, high or something in the settings. So I set it to low. So hopefully it's not too much. I like to do a bit of wildlife video. Have you got any suggestions regarding a mic not too expensive to capture nature sound with my OM1 Mark II? So generally you want to get the longest mic you can that has sort of this, that only looks for sound in front of the camera in a very narrow beam. I forget what that's called, that beam pattern. Someone here knows what I'm talking about. But I'll show you one. I never use it. If you were here, I would just give it to you. Okay, there's this. And all right. So this one is this one's a pretty good mic. Comica, this is old though, VM20. It has a built-in battery, and it comes with a sleeve, like a foam sleeve to help reduce wind noise. But this has a very, very narrow beam pattern. So it's going to minimize any noises from the side and behind and only focus on what's in front of the camera. Right? So you want to look for mics like this, and you want to look at the specs to make sure that it's not like an omnidirectional mic that picks up sound everywhere, but only focuses on what's in front. So these are the kind of mics you want to look for. I can't give you a recommendation for a specific brand, but Comica makes good mics. Comica makes good mics that are budget friendly, okay? I have another Comica mic here, and Rode makes some good mics too, right? This is a little bit smaller one, the same idea. It is it's focused on getting sound from in front of the mic. Now, the difference is this one is not self-powered. So you have to turn on the mic power in your camera. There's a camera menu setting for turning the mic power on or off. So this microphone draws power from the camera to work. These are condenser microphones. And I put it in this giant wind muff thing to, and this is also stabilized with rubber bands as well. Because this is a problem, right? When it's on camera, just any motion at all gets picked up in the camera. So you're going to have to, when you buy a microphone like this, make sure it comes with some sort of dampening system like this. And then try to work on a tripod if you can, or monopod to minimize. You know, you want to sound stabilize, right? It's kind of like image stabilization. This is sound stabilization. You want this to have as less motion as possible, or less impact to vibrate the camera, because it's gonna pick up like the image stabilization in the camera. This microphone can pick it up, the sound of that image stabilization in the microphone, because it's so sensitive. So that's why you have to make sure there's a very good dampening. So look for things like this. I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that, right? Good dampening, the longer the better. And then have a furry cat, you know, wind buffering type thing, and you'll be all right. And self-powered is better. If it has its own power, then you can adjust the levels right here. This has a level adjustment here. So if they're self-powered, you also have the level adjustment here, rather than using the one in the camera. And these will have overall less noise and better sound quality when they're self-powered. So find a self-powered boom mic with some kind of dampening system, and you should be okay. And Comica is a good brand. And said, I trialed the 150 to 400 for sports nature, but for long range I went with Sony A1 200 to 600 for the price of the 150 to 400. Okay, that makes sense, right? The 200 to 600 is not that expensive. It's a couple $1,000, and an A1 is like 5,000, 6,000. Also like 50 megapixels for band orchestra prints. Yes. A1 is nice. My friend has the A1. She used the 200 to 600 for a while. She traded it and bought the 300 2.8 and the 2X teleconverter. The much smaller, lighter combination, and she thinks it's sharper than she was getting with her 200 to 600, even with the teleconverter. So just thought I'd share that with you. I can't tell you firsthand, but her experience was, I don't know what those lenses cost. I don't know what a 300 2.8 costs. It might be as much as a 150 to 400. I don't know. You know, don't quote me on any pricing here. But I'm just telling you, I'm familiar with what you're talking about, because my friend shot with that. We go out all the time, and she shot with that a lot, the 200 to 600, and she was not happy with the results. So she bought the 300 2.8 with the teleconverter. Now she's very, very happy. I use Firefox and YouTube ad blockers. Okay. I cannot, as a YouTuber, talk about that. But they got really strict rules for creators on YouTube. Like, can't talk about those things. Rob, can exposures be used in manual mode? Exposure compensation be used in manual mode? Yes. With my Nikon, when in manual mode, I can press the exposure comp button and adjust exposure compensation. This doesn't seem to work with my OM1. So in manual mode, basically you're controlling aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, right? Those three things. So exposure compensation doesn't come in because you're setting all the exposures. But if you want to control shutter speed and aperture, you have to put ISO into ISO auto mode. So if you put it in ISO auto, then you should have exposure compensation. So you'll have to set up the dials and everything. I don't know if I can show you. I'll try real quick. Let me. Okay. All right, so camera's in manual mode, right? So go into your wrench menu. Let me lower the screen brightness so it's easier to see. Okay, so go into your wrench menu and then go down here to dial settings and click on that and dial function. Go down here. Whoops, go down here to manual and bulb. And then you want to assign the front one to aperture and the rear one to shutter speed. I'm sorry. You want exposure compensation on the front one, for example. Let me see if that worked. Okay, then also in the super control panel, you need to go over to your ISO and just set that to auto, like that. And now you'll see here, I have exposure compensation on the front dial. Oops. Hold on. I hit this button by mistake. But now I can rotate. I'm going to rotate the front dial here. I can dial in exposure compensation this way. So minus 1.3, plus 1.3, and then I can adjust my shutter speed with the rear dial, whatever I want. Now aperture, is not assigned to a dial, so you have to, if you want to change the aperture, you can do it. Oh, I don't have a lens on, but you can do it in the super control panel. Or you can flip this dial, you can flip the lever and then set it to control the aperture. So that would be in the, doing this live, the workflow is not linear here, but go back over to, go back to your dial settings, dial function, manual mode. So this is for lever position 1, this is for lever position 2. So you can assign lever position 2 be your aperture. Like that. I mean, there's lots of ways to configure it. Some people like to configure the aperture, to the front dial, shutter speed to the rear dial, and then have exposure compensation, by using the exposure compensation button. So you push that, and then you rotate the dial, then you push it back, and it goes back. So, whoops, I hit record. I think that's the right way to do it. But, so there's the exposure compensation button up here. But I just want to, I showed you that way because that's the way I do it, but there's a lot of different ways to do it to configure exposure compensation in manual mode. Okay, what techniques does 11 frames per second shooter use for birds in flight if you also have bird detection? It wouldn't be any different than, regardless of your frames per second, just a matter of your, yeah, there's no difference. You still need to keep your shutter speeds up 1/2000 to 1/4000. And so nothing different than any other technique. How fast your camera shoots is, I think, independent of birds in flight technique. And I'm all into OM system. I own nearly everything apart from that big 150 to 600 and 2 whites. And the two, yeah, so the 50 to 250 and the 150 to 400. Just meant that if I'd be shooting for a crop, that I'd do it with a 40 or 6. Oh, got it. I got it. So again, we're back to what is the math of cropping in on a high resolution sensor versus using micro four thirds sensor that's already cropped with various lenses. I mean, it's just a numbers game. Let's see. So much chat to catch up on. And Martlet says, by the way, I shot track and field with a 300 f4 and a 40-150-2.8 with my OM1 Mark II and EM1 Mark I. Only problem I had was also carrying the 12 to 40-2.8 Pro, which I really need in a third body. Yeah. I also have the 50 to 250 APS-C lens. Variable aperture. The stabilizer is so rock solid. I'm always amazed, and I basically have replaced my 18 to 400 Tamron for walk around. Okay, they're not really equivalent. The 18 to 400 is much wider. I get it on the long end though, but on the wide end, not really equivalent. So why does DxO look different on different computers? Well, if we're talking about Windows and Mac, they're definitely going to have a little different interface, like user interface, where the buttons and dials and keystrokes work. But I can't imagine between two different Windows computers that they would be different. I'm not familiar with Mac, so it shouldn't look any different. Now, if you're talking about the output, why does it look different? That's another story. That's going to depend on the settings that you have in DxO, but ultimately you should be able to get, you should have the same exact user experience and the same exact final output of DxO regardless of what Windows computer it's on. And Jeffrey says, perspective over time is helpful looking back decades. Since around 2010 to 2012, it's all good enough to make images to satisfy digitally and in print. Yes. Can TCs be used with the 75 to 300? No, they cannot. The main problem with teleconverters, or at least for OM systems, is, it protrudes out, right? You can see that protrusion. Hard to see it. Let me get the light on there. You see this protrusion, right? Now, if you look at the 300 f4 Pro, the rear element is very deep inside. So there's room for the teleconverter to go in. The 75 to 300, or even this lens here, the 12 to 45 cannot use teleconverters because you can see the rear element is sitting right up against the lens mount. There's no opening in here, so this is not going to work. So that's the problem with most of the lenses that cannot use teleconverters, because of the rear elements are in the way. And other than optical design and all of that. Let's see. So, David answered your question. I just showed you part of the reason. It's physically not possible, and optically they weren't designed to take teleconverters. And Darren Lentz says, expecting 300 f4 tomorrow from MPB for lunar eclipse. What tripod head would you recommend for the lens with the OM1 Mark II? So really, it's got to be an all-metal ball head with at least, I would say, at least a 35 to 40 millimeter ball in the middle. So something, well, you know, ball about that big. I hate the word ball because it's just, it's got so many double entendre type situations that you would use. So you want to use, now I'm bringing out a ruler. This is silly, but you get the idea. I would say a 40 millimeter ball head, tripod head. So let me just show you an example. So I'm just kind of giving you a general idea, right? So AM40 heavy duty 40 millimeter tripod ball head. These are expensive. This is a 36 millimeter. This one's pretty good. This one works well. But this is right near the limit. Okay. I know it says it supports 33 pounds, but I'm talking about like in practice. But this one would work as well. Something like this. This is a 36 millimeter, but this would be the minimum I would buy as far as a ball head goes to support the 300 f4. But if you can get a 40, if you can find a 40 millimeter that's not $100, you'll be okay. See, here's oh, this is a good one. This is kind of big. This is a 50 millimeter. But a 50 millimeter would be perfect. More than enough. So there's two things you have to look at. So they have some good pictures here. So look at the height. The height is not quite as critical, but the shorter the ball head is, the more stable it's going to be, or inherently stable. Physics, to go back to that word. It's going to be more inherently stable if it's a lower profile, which this is. This is a low profile design. The second thing is the bottom diameter. How big is the base of the tripod head? You need to make sure that's going to fit your tripod legs that you're going to be putting it onto. If it's way bigger than your current tripod legs, it's not going to be that stable. You're just wasting money. If it's too small, that's unlikely the case, but you don't want to get a ball head that's too small for your tripod legs. Again, it's going to be inherently unstable. And then here they talk about the ball diameter. So that's critical. You want that to be at least 36. I would recommend 40 millimeters. But if you go higher, it's okay. But the bigger you go on the diameter there, the bigger the base diameter, the bottom diameter is going to be. So just keep those kinds of things in mind when you're buying a ball head. Okay. David says, I paid around $400 last year, but Black Friday for the 75 to 300. So the 100, 400 is like 3 times the cost. Yes. So like I said, if 300f4 is not on your radar at all because of price. The 100 to 400 is a nice upgrade to the 75 to 300. But if the 300f4 is in the ballpark, I would save up and go for that and skip the 100 to 400. And that's the situation I found myself in. I look at my 2013 China gallery with the EM5 bodies and kit glass, including the 75 to 300, a couple of f1.8 primes, and I couldn't really do better noticeably with current gear, composition modes notwithstanding. Yes, I agree. You know, if you're doing best practices in your photography with exposure and composition, you know, all these things, right? You're going to take a great photo regardless of the gear, right? So that's that. The 75 to 300 is fine, but next week I'm adding the 50 to 200 to, oh, so the M40, the Micro Four, the 4/3 version, right? Isn't it the 4/3? 50 to 200? I don't know if that's the same one I have. I think. You know, you need an adapter, but yeah, this is the one. 50 to 250, 50 to 200, f2.8 to 3.5. This lens is very sharp, and it does focus pretty well. I got a generic 4/3 adapter, works, but I had to put, with the generic one, someone told me to get a rubber band. They sent me these rubber bands to put around here, so now I don't have any slop in the mount. Because before it was kind of a little sloppy going on and off, but now it feels nice and snug. You lose bird detect, and I think you keep. Let me just put it on the camera. There's a, and you probably already know this. XMeta knows everything. Okay, so let's see what happens. So SH1 works. SH2 is missing. How come I don't have SH2? Let me check my menu. SH2 is here. I need to change it to 25. Let me see if that. It's weird, but I have SH2 enabled, but it's just not showing up. How about just continuous shutter? Yeah, so continuous shutter's fine, right? You can see it there. But I lost SH2, and let's see if bird detect and all that is, yeah, bird detect, face detect, all that is gone. So you lose some functionality with, and it might be because of my adapter. I don't know. I don't think so, but anyway, yeah, it's very sharp though. That lens is amazing. Amazing. Optically, that lens is amazing. So if you work within the limitations that I have with my setup, I've gotten great results with it, though I don't take it out much. And let's see. In my experience, the 75 to 300 can vary greatly in quality. Yeah, there's something called like or copy variance or whatever, like the quality from a production line. You know, the tolerance and thing. Anyway, basically what he's saying is that we could both buy the 75 to 300 off the shelf, and my copy might be a little sharper than your copy and vice versa because of sample variance. And plug nickels, the 450, The 400 to 150 with TC is a good alternative to the 75 to 300. If you don't want to go for the 100 to 400, a bit bigger and heavier, but more versatile, yes. So David Crooks does that a lot. He shoots with the 40 to 150 and teleconverter. 150 to 600 is f5 to 6.3, okay? So like I was saying, it's less, it's less than a stop on the short end, but a little more than a stop on the long end, right? And Anthony says, from province of New, hey Anthony, good to see you. All I need for front door shooting is my two lenses. Yep. The 12 to 100 and 150 to 600. So I know Anthony was very happy with his 150 to 600 and OM1 Mark II when he got it. He had a lot of anticipation about the future of OM systems, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the combinations or the lenses and cameras that he bought, he's very happy with. Have you ever messed with something like the DJI Osmo Pocket 3? Yes. I have the Pocket 1. Great little camera. I didn't see any reason to get the DJI Pocket 2 or Pocket 3. I much prefer a fixed lens rather than a gimbal head. Those gimbal heads are breaking all the time. Although I never broke mine, but by some miracle, I've never broken mine. I'm not walking around, and the image stabilization from these, like this Ace Pro 2, is freaking amazing. The digital image stabilization, that I didn't see a need for having a kind of a fragile gimbal. What's the longest manual focus you've used? Oh, okay. 200 millimeter f4 manual focus. The Nikon F mount 200 f4. Amazing lens. That's the longest I've shot with manual focus. The map camera on eBay pays the tariff. Oh, okay. Because I have that. I have the 150 to 400 on my watch list. I don't know why. I'm never gonna buy it. My right brain says don't buy it. You can't afford it. My left brain says just get it. How long are you gonna live anyway? My right brain, you know what I mean? Terrible. If I was married, I could ask my wife and say, what do you think? Then I'll have my answer. Could be yes or no. I don't want to pass any judgment, but if I was married, the decision would be so much simpler because I could ask my wife and say, oh, funny story this morning. I was out shooting and ran into some friends, and this new person comes up, very attractive young lady comes up, and my friend's standing next to me. She's married, and she goes, she says, I stick to Rob because, he's good luck, He always finds these great, all these great things happen when I'm next to him. And the other lady that just came up says, oh, is this your husband? Right? And she goes, and I said, no, I'm single. How you doing? Nice to meet you. I don't know. You had to be there. It's much funnier when I was there. I don't know if that was inappropriate or not, but she was asking if I was her husband. And I said, no, I'm single. I mean, she wasn't that young, but she was probably half my age. So I was just kidding, of course. But anyway, I will say it focuses great on the 200 to 500 lens with 2.0 teleconverter on my Z50. Okay. Is there such a thing as a generic third-party TC? No, there is not. And if there were, it would be crap. I've tried third-party teleconverters back when I used to shoot Nikon. They sucked so bad. Oh, But this was years ago. Maybe it's improved since then. In German, it's Richte microphone. Google translates as directional microphone. Okay. Rob, I have Olympus microphone, but I haven't used it yet. Oh, yeah, the little tiny one that has like double-sided, has a mic on the left and right side. Is that the one you're talking about? It's kind of like a T shape with left and right mics. I have that somewhere. I used it once, twice. But those are omnidirectional mics, so they weren't very good for vlogging either. You want to create a forest ambiance and not capture a sophic animal noise. I'd recommend 2 spaced out omnis like the DJI Mic 2 or 3. Okay. I thought he was asking about wildlife though. If we're talking about what Serge was asking about. Yeah, if you want ambience, then you want an omnidirectional mic. But if you want to focus on wildlife, I think a directional mic makes sense. Oh, that's not for me, not for me. The Sony 300mm 2.8 is $7,000. Okay. And Jeffrey says, yes, the 300 2.8 plus 2x would be sharper than the 600 f5.6. Lots more money though, apples and oranges. Okay. See, I wasn't quite sure. I know she paid a little more, but I didn't know it was a $5,000 gap. Ugh. I tried raising my max ISO to 12,800 after listening to Li Hoi. I think it's a reasonable move in my often fogged in conditions. Yes. Yeah, I shoot at high ISO all the time. I mean, it is what it is. Shutter speed is more critical. Having the shutter speed you need is more important than um, trying to fix ISO in post. And Robert is here. Good to see you. Uh, wow, so much chat I need to catch up to, and I'm running a little bit behind here. And like comparing the 300 f4 to the 150 to 600, the Sony 200 to 600 quite as sharp as the 150 to 400. We compromise where it makes the most sense. Yep. Yeah, life is a compromise in general. Everything is a compromise. I mean, even if you spend 3 or 4 times as much money on the lens, there's still a compromise because now you're out 3 or 4 times the money. That's a compromise to me. And Miranda's here. Hello from Spain. Thank you for joining us today. Let's see. Ja, 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 nice. I have one too. Okay. I'm not sure what you're referring to. And Lauren is here. I set up every camera the same or as much as possibly available as the same between cameras. The front dial is aperture and the rear dial is exposure compensation. Okay. Yeah, it's very configurable. Hopefully that helped you with the manual, like exposure comp in manual mode. Whoever was asking earlier. Darko says the 18 to 400 was great F mount from the Tamron, but the AF and stabilization as well as the weight is night and day when compared to the Z50 to the 250. That is why I chose to use the Z lens. Okay. So again, it's compromise, right? You sacrifice a little bit of on the long end, on the wide end, to save size and weight on the sort of the meaty end, right? Between 50 and 250 is where you'd probably get most of your shots. The only way to use TCs with other lenses is an extension tube, but then you can't achieve infinity focus, right? Yeah, extension tubes by themselves take away infinity focus, not the combination of the two, just to clarify a little bit. I recently bought a Mac for the first time. Oh my God, the difference in using DxO on the Mac, it flies compares to Windows. Good, good. Got me thinking about Mac, but I just, I don't know. I don't know if you've known me that long. I just cannot buy an Apple product. Too many issues. Personal issues, not technical. They make great stuff, but I just personal issues with Apple. And Rob, do you have a leather half case for your OM3 or do you use a third-party grip? I use a grip. I like this one that I got from Leo Photo. It kind of looks like this on the bottom. It has a minor grip, you know, relatively small grip, but that's what I use. Better put my lens back on, otherwise end up getting dust on the sensor. Pain. Not even face detect. Yes, I did not see face detect come up. And Moranis is OM3 similar Pen F in its time or better. Well, if we're talking about the camera technology itself, it's way better than the Pen F was. If we're talking about you know, quality of materials, build quality, about the same. Because the Pen F had exceptional build quality and quality materials used. In terms of design, it's subjective. And I think it's apples and oranges. The one is a rangefinder style, the OM3 is a DSLR or SLR style. So I like both, so I don't have a preference. So those are the three ways I can answer that question, I guess. And Robin Wrong just did a short review this morning for members of his channel on 4/3 50 to 250 on the OM1. He picked one up for $250. He doesn't recommend buying one, but it's fine if you already own it. Okay. $250. Wow, that's cheap. OM5 is still showing $749 at B&H closeout. The OM3 is $1695 right now. Maybe the closeout price will be $1,500 or less. In regard to grip, use a wrist strap or shoulder strap. Okay. And Dave says, my wife said no. Okay. And ask Ellie. Okay, I have to get going. There's so many things here. I'll try and finish this. Ask my wife if I can buy more gear. That's a good one. And 1.5x SHQ Kenko for Pentax is pretty good. Oh, so we're talking about teleconverters. I'm not familiar with it. It's pretty good one if speaking about third-party teleconverters. Okay. Kenko makes good stuff, though. That's true. In general, I didn't know they made a teleconverter for Pentax. Yeah, back in the film days, most third-party stuff was less than great. Yep. And so hard, do not use pro lenses even on a small setup. Ended up putting a 12 to 45 f4 Pro on an EP7. And the mic name you're looking for is Shotgun Mic. Thank you. Thank you, Hesse. The Shotgun Mic. And Stuart Riley, good to see you. Hello. And the Sony 2X teleconverter isn't cheap either. It's $600. Wow. But I think the Olympus one or OM System one is 500, right? It's not that cheap. And what about a monochrome Pentax wildlife photography? Have you tried that? And would low light shots be easier? I don't know about low light. You know, if it's low light, I don't bother with wildlife photography, but I have done it. Meaning I've done wildlife with the Pentax monochrome. I don't know if I posted them. Okay, there's a couple. I took these with my Pentax monochrome. And that one. These are the backyard birds, but I have And what lens? This was probably when I bought that lens. I bought, what is this? The 55 to 300. This is a good lens. Let's see. Thought I had more. There's some dogs. Not wildlife though. Here's a woodpecker. This came out pretty good. I don't know why there it is. I don't know what this bird was, but I like how he's looking at me. It front focused a little bit on the branch here, but come on, it's a DSLR. It's not an OM1. This came out pretty nice. Yep, I like these. So yeah, I've done it. Okay. And Joseph says, hi from tiny Malta, Europe. I have an OM5. Should I get a used Pen F? I want creative color JPEG control. So, okay, so what I would recommend before you buy a Pen F just for that one thing is if you use OM Workspace, it has the color wheel in the editing. Play around with the color wheel on OM Workspace. Only the saturation, not the hue. Only the saturation sliders. And see if you can get colors that you want with the images that you take with the OM5. I mean, the color creative wheel, honestly, I just feel like it's a bit overrated. I've tried playing with it a lot, and I have presets and things like that I've used that some people seem to enjoy. But I much rather post-process my images and get the color and look that I want rather than trying to do it in camera. And that would include like even Panasonic's LUTs that they have, Fujifilm's film simulations that they have. I just never cared for all of those things. I'd rather do it myself, you know, in post-processing. Now, if you want to do in camera all the time, straight out of camera type work, there are some good settings people have put out for the OM3 and the Pen F. The settings are interchangeable. But try using OM Workspace to achieve the colors that you want to try. Because you can put the recipes from online for OM3 and Pen F into OM Workspace. And see if you like the colors that you can get using those kind of controls. Or trade it in for the OM3 for roughly the same money. Torn between, oh, so there's part two of that question. I would trade in. I would trade in and get the OM3. Hands down. Rather than buying a Pen F and having two cameras, just buy the OM3. Then you'll have one really, really good camera that's better than the other two combined. Yesterday I watched someone using Polaroid apparently back in style with younger generations. So funny to see that pic pop out and yeah. Rob, it's time to find Ellie and get the UPS driver down from the tree. Have a great week. All right, Lauren, thanks. And Xmeta says, do you think you can borrow the new 50 to 200 and do comparison? No. I don't know anybody that owns one. And for whatever reason, OM Systems is dusted me. I don't know why, but it's okay. Not dusted me, ghosted me. Like, I don't hear from them at all. Okay, and thanks, Rob. Okay, glad that was helpful. The bird is a cardinal. Oh, okay. Thank you. And thanks, Rob, for all you do. I have to head out. Okay. Yeah, I do too, actually. I think I caught up, though. I did catch up with all the chats. So I'm going to call it here because I have to get going. Thank you everyone for joining me today. It's been great. I really appreciate it. I didn't get a chance to talk about my event photography, but maybe we'll talk about that next week. And it's as always, you guys have a good day. Do that every day, and you'll have a good life. So eat healthy and exercise. I want to see you all again soon. Thanks again for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.